Dennis, I want to start with Parliament because Parliament's due to come back beginning the 23rd of March, House and Senate for 1 week. Obviously, they need the Parliament to sit, the government to pass the stimulus package announced last week and health announcements and potentially more stimulus if it's needed and comes before the budget. But there weren't too many people moving around the bubble that is Canberra, and the PM's talking about perhaps just moving forward with quorum, which is a bare majority for the House to sit formally in the House and the Senate. Is that what you're hearing? And does that mean you get the week off?
I wish it was, Peter, but no, I'll be working and although I may be working from home on the iPad and watching Sky. But look, what they're trying to do is limit the number of people gathering in any area. Parliament House has, of course, a huge number of people in one small area. They've travelled from all over Australia during a sitting time, and there are literally thousands of people coming and going from an air-conditioned environment. It is not the best way to try and limit the spread of a virus. So the government is looking. We've already received this afternoon a note about trying to restrict the number of people coming into Parliament. Some of the public areas will continue to be open. All the school groups are cancelled. The public galleries of the Parliament will be shut. There is still be press gallery people present, but they're trying to keep the numbers to a minimum. Now, this issue of a quorum raises an interesting point. Anthony Albanese has already said today he's a bit concerned about the issue of the quorum. Labor, of course, has been calling for the Parliament to be recalled this week, which, of course, would suit Labor to get back in the spotlight because they're sidelined with Scott Morrison's National Cabinet, which Anthony Albanese feels is just a fancy name for COAG. But what they're trying to do in Parliament, they have to actually pass the legislation, more legislation to come tomorrow more likely, and they're just trying to limit the number. Now, this will require a great deal of cooperation from Labor and the opposition and the independents, so it will just have to see how it goes. It's going to be a test of just how apolitical and bipartisan the support for the fight against coronavirus is.
Yeah, and the economic fight is the real worry. Newspoll today, 51-49 to Labor. It's pretty much the territory we've seen it in some time. The government would be not unhappy with those sorts of numbers. Primary vote up 2 to 40 for the coalition, up 2 to 36 for Labor. The real move, I guess, for the Prime Minister is that people are happy with how he has managed this crisis so far. I wouldn't read too much into it, Dennis. When we get into these very tough times, don't we? We see a flight of support to whoever is the incumbent leader because Australians are sort of willing them to succeed. But this tells you that all sort of normal warfare, if I can call it that in political terms, has been suspended because this issue is dominating everything else.
That's true, and look, the primary vote rose for both the major parties, with falls for the others, which basically went back to the coalition, and for the Greens, which basically went back to Labor. People like to go back to the structure of the major parties during times of crisis. And as well, it was the best figures, personal figures, for Scott Morrison since before the criticism he faced over the bushfires during December and January. Now, just on the point of the politicisation or otherwise, I think Anthony Albanese has been very clever. As he was during the bushfire crisis, he used the criticism and dissatisfaction of the general situation to subtly criticise Scott Morrison without too much name-calling. And again, he's mounting an argument that the economy was in a bad way before the coronavirus, before the bushfires, and he's also picking away at the way the government is introducing things. Just the sitting of Parliament, for instance, he's trying to suggest that Labor has been coming up with ideas, the government has been slow to react. This is to feed into the social media, the Twitterati that Scott Morrison asked us not to take notice of, and it will have the same effect, or could have the same effect, that the bushfire criticism had. Scott Morrison learnt his lesson from the bushfires. Politically, he has been much more aggressive in dealing with the coronavirus. He's established the so-called National Cabinet. He's been working very closely with the states, including the Labor states. He's been taking all of the advice from the medical officers, and he's basically given up on the budget surplus and the prospect of a technical recession. He's throwing everything at this, but the real challenge he faces as a leader and the real advantage that Anthony Albanese has is it is so unpredictable. The Prime Minister doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow. He doesn't know what's going to happen at the end of the month, and he doesn't even know what's going to happen at the end of 3 months. So economic planning is very difficult, and trying to get the scale of health response is the other big issue which the government will be tested on.
All right, I've got to leave it there, Dennis Shanahan. Thank you very much for your time tonight.